Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about none other than the iPad mini 4 and see how this device holds up in 2020. Now what's funny is this is one of those iPads that has held up pretty okay throughout time. There's nothing super crazy about it besides the fact that it has a pretty outdated chipset and the fact that it's still getting software support, which is so funny. So if you want to pick up this iPad, I'll probably end up leaving it linked down below, but I'd probably recommend the successor to this, which is the iPad mini 5, as well as some other iPads. I'll go ahead and find and link them down below. So get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now looking around the body of these iPads, after reviewing so many of these things, I can tell you I am so in love with iPads. I think Apple just nailed it out of the park even from the beginning with the original iPad 1, even with the first iPad mini. Even though there was a little development in terms of the body from pretty much every single iPad mini, there really didn't need to be a crazy amount for at least for the first couple because of the premiumness of these devices. And with the iPad mini 4 and with the mini 5, you're really not going to feel like you're missing out on either one too much in my opinion. So this thing does have that 7.9 inch IPS panel on the front, and it's 1536 by 2048, and as I stated before, that is a pretty good resolution to have on this type of device. That is extremely high. Like, that is a really good resolution, and when you have an iPad like this, the panel is not one of those things you're going to be complaining about. So keep that in mind. I mean, you're definitely not going to be complaining about the screen at all. There is a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom with that home button. I mean, it's kind of a lot, but it's not that bad, especially when you compare it to something like the new iPad Pros or something. Then you're obviously going to see a little bit of a difference. But I think for a majority of people out there, you're really not going to be complaining too much about the way it looks. You have that front camera as well, which is great. On the bottom, you have that lightning port, which is perfectly fine for me. I don't really care about USB Type-C on an iPad right now, especially considering this thing came out before any USB-C iPads came out, so it's okay. Headphone jack on the bottom as well. And on the back, you have the aluminum back to it. There's no wireless charging on any iPads or anything, so it's totally okay. And you do have that single camera setup up top. And as I stated before, this is one of the best feeling iPads. I mean, these are all the iPads feel pretty much the same, but this is still a really cool thing about it. When you have a device like this, you're definitely going to feel like you have a premium iPad. You're not going to feel like you have an outdated thing by any means. Even though this thing is almost 6 years old, it's not going to give you that vibe at all. So in terms of the feeling in the hand, thumbs up for me. The panel is pretty okay still. It's actually pretty good. You have Touch ID, you have the front camera, back camera, aluminum feeling, lightning port, headphone jack. You have a lot of stuff on this thing that still kind of hold up. And this is not the area where I would complain about. The body is not one of those things I would complain about. Now it does have that camera setup, which I'll go and hit on pretty quickly. It has that 8 megapixel sensor on the back and a 1.2 megapixel front facing camera. Now what I can tell you about this specific lens type is that the back camera for the most part I think is okay. It's like an iPhone 6 camera. That's literally the best way I can kind of put it into words. It's really, really good if you're trying to do FaceTime calls and stuff, but if you're trying to go and actually film videos on this thing or trying to make a YouTube video or something like that, I don't know. I don't think it's probably going to get it's going to be okay. Any camera's better than no camera, but you can do a lot more if you're trying to look at a camera standpoint. You can get a lot better camera from an iPhone than an iPad, so I don't know why you're trying to shoot videos on this thing. Now, I do like the viewfinder. I like having that bigger display so I can kind of see things within the camera a little bit better, but like I said before, I think if you have this type of device, you're probably going to be okay with the camera on the back. The front camera is also okay, it's only 1.2 megapixels, so it's not a crazy big camera, only 720p videos on the front as well. I think the perfect use case for this type of iPad is somebody who wants to kind of shoot, FaceTime calls or Zoom calls or Google Meets or whatever you want to do in terms of a video conference kind of thing. This is the perfect device for that. But if you're trying to actually, like I said before, film actual videos and trying to make, some high quality videos, you might be able to get by with this thing, but I would probably recommend going up to something I would recommend using an iPhone. Even an iPhone 6s has a better camera than this thing, and that thing costs way less than this, so keep that in mind. But I think the way I would rate this camera is probably something like a 5.5 out of 10, maybe a 4 out of 10. I'm glad that it has cameras, but outside of the usability of it in terms of video conference, there's really not much to it. So in terms of camera, that pretty much covers it up. Now, hitting on, I think the weirder aspect of this device, and it's the thing that makes the iPad mini 4 so weird in 2021, is because this thing, on one hand, is not probably going to be getting any more software updates. I think iPadOS 14 is probably the last version of software this thing is going to be getting. It only makes sense to me, but also something that makes this device so legendary is the software. The fact that it got these many software updates for this long amount of time is crazy to me. This thing has the Apple A8 chip inside of it. Now what does that mean? This device has the same chipset as the iPhone 6. What does that mean? The iPhone 6 basically stopped getting support on iOS 12. This device continued to get support, past iPadOS 12. This thing got up to iPadOS 14 and it's still getting software support as of me making this video. So that's why it's so perplexing to me that, like, on one hand, yeah, it's not really that crazy of a software right now. Maybe it doesn't have the most amount of features from iPadOS 12, whatever the case you're going to say. I just think it's crazy that this thing still got software support these many years later. So I don't even think it's a bad thing that this thing stopped getting support this year, or if it's going to stop getting support, I really don't know. It's just the fact that this thing even got more support than a device that has the same chipset inside of it, 2 versions on top of that. So it's definitely something crazy to me. I'll never really understand it, but it is something that I just can't get it wrapped around my head. So software wise, that's kind of how it covered that thing up. But in terms of the battery life, this is another area where this device, I don't know if it took an LN, but a 5,124 mAh battery is definitely not, like I said before, the biggest battery size ever. I think it actually decreased from the predecessor, but I would have liked to seen a little bit of an increase in the battery size, something like a 7,000 mAh battery or something. A lot of iPads, I think I just reviewed the iPad 3 and that thing had like an 11,000 mAh battery or something. So it would have been cool if this thing had a bigger battery, but there's really nothing we can do about it anymore. So in terms of, the software and the battery, that really pretty much covers it up here. Now, ending it off with the performance. I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you the specs first. This thing has that Apple A8 chip inside of it with 2 gigabytes of RAM. Now, the 2 gigs of RAM are really the main reason why I think this thing even got more software updates than it should have. So that area, I'm glad it got that. But on the flip side, you really don't need a crazy amount of RAM on an iPad mini of that, even especially this thing. You don't need that much RAM in order to get a pretty decent experience from it. Now, I think the Apple A8 chip was kind of a slow chip in and of itself. So when you compare an A8 chip with something like an A10 chip, in my opinion, I think the A10 Fusion, especially the A11 chip, those devices were really, really good. And I think with the A8, that's really not a crazy big, performance jump from the A7. So keep that in mind. But this is what I'll tell you. If you're somebody who is a student, and I always bring the students in because I feel like they're the ones who use the iPads the most, you're probably going to be getting an okay experience. And the way I say that, and I say that a lot, is because if you're doing, you're reading textbooks from your iPad, if you're highlighting stuff, if you're taking notes on an iPad or whatever, I think you might get an okay experience, meaning that as long as you're not doing anything crazy, like, multitasking between a bunch of different apps and all that stuff, then I think you're going to have a good experience for the most part. It's going to be glitchy, it's not going to be extremely fast, and there's going to be some lag here and there, but I think for the most part it's probably going to be an okay experience. Now, on the flip side, if you're trying to go up and do something else, if you're trying to go and, create some sort of crazy tools with your iPad and you're trying to play some huge intensive games and stuff, you may not be getting the best experience from your specific iPad, and you may be better off getting something like an iPad Air 3 or the iPad Pro 10.5 inch or even an iPad Pro 3. I mean, if you can spend a little bit more money, those devices are going to be getting you a much better experience with much better software longevity rather than the iPad Mini 4. I think the Mini 4 is great for media consumption. So if you just want to watch a bunch of YouTube videos or Netflix and stuff, then I think the iPad Mini 4 is the device for you. But if you're trying to actually use it as an iPad and use all the features of the iPad, including, take a bunch of videos and play a bunch of games and do all this other crazy stuff and multitask between a lot of apps, you may not be getting the most amount of experience from this device. So I think that's kind of how I would sum it up. It's definitely not a crazy bad iPad, but I think it's definitely not the best, and I don't even think it's the best for the money. So in terms of performance, that pretty much covers it up. Now, to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and pick up the iPad Mini 4 in 2021? Well, this is what I'll pretty much tell you. I think the iPad Mini 4 is like such an okay average. It's like the most average iPad I can think of. I don't really think there's anything super bad with it, but I don't think there's anything really good with it either. I think Apple kind of made it kind of a little bit better because of the software. The fact that it got the extra versions of software on that A8 chip is super impressive in and of itself. And I think that's one reason why this device holds up so well is because of the software. But I think the bigger problem with this device is probably the fact that maybe it's not getting any more software versions, but also the performance isn't really that good. Like I stated before, if you're somebody who wants to go and, just use this iPad as something like a, MacBook alternative or a laptop alternative, I don't think it's probably the best. I would rather buy a MacBook of this price tag rather than this iPad because I feel like I'd be getting way better performance from that thing. However, if you're somebody who just wants to use this iPad as something like a, like a media consumption device, you want to use it to watch movies and, play videos, and maybe you want to play a game here and there, you want to surf through the internet, I think this is a perfect iPad. I really don't think you need a crazy amount of performance from it. But if you're a student and you want to really take use of everything from an iPad and you want to get some crazy performance from it, this may not be the case for you. I think you're going to be better, like I said before, getting something like an iPad Pro 2nd gen, if that's the very bare minimum I would recommend. A better thing would be an iPad Air 3 or maybe the iPad Pro 3rd gen. If you can spend a little bit more money, that would probably be the better way to go too. So in terms of that, all that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'd mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.